Hello ladies and gentlemen, and finally welcome back to a new video. It's been a while and I apologize for that, but you know, it's the whole pandemic going on and teaching, so I've been really busy, but I'm back, so let's hope I can do more content in the near future, so don't have to wait like half a year anymore for something else to show up. But today I want to talk about light baking while keeping your reflections, right? That's a very interesting topic that actually bugged me for quite a while till I figured it out finally. And it's a trick that I want to show you. So I want to show you how to go from this scene to this scene that you can see now. So both scenes are baked, like 100% baked lighting, and with lights that are set to bake. So there are no real-time lights in here and there are no mixed lights in here. So some of you might be wondering now, like, hey, why don't you just use mixed lights to actually get the highlights in there? Because sometimes you can't, right? If you have a big scene with a lot of windows, for example, or a lot of like diffuse lighting that you need to add, you can't set everything to mixed lighting because they'll be too expensive. That means that it will take too much FPS and therefore slow down your game. So you have to bake lights. But when you bake lights, you can see here in this scene, you lose highlights, and that makes the scene look very flat and boring. So some of you might say, you know what, just add a probe in here, right? So a reflection probe I have in here as well. So I actually added it here. Let me just hit bake for you guys, and nothing changes, right? So how do you keep highlights? Simple trick that I'll show you right now. So my setup here is I've got an area light in here that's now set to baked. I've got a probe in here. I've got a directional light in here that is set to real time, but it's like aimed at far away from the building because I need my environmental to my environment to show up. So let's do this, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to set this one to mixed again, so I can show you the difference between mixed and baked. So I'm using the GPU here, so it's super fast. If it works, it's absolutely amazing. If it works, it's still iffy, you know, sometimes, but you know, 4 seconds, there we go. But you can already see, right, we now get highlights again because we set the light to mixed, and that means we actually get some real-time lighting in here. And just let it finish. There we go. So why do you want to have highlights, right? Because highlights are the most interesting part about your texture. The color is boring, but the highlights make something look interesting, because this looks a lot more interesting than the image that we had before. But again, like I said before, sometimes you can't use mixed lights because it's too expensive. So let me show you the trick. So I'm going to turn my light off. Now I have a completely empty scene here with nothing in it. So I'm going to add a plane, right? I'm going to add a simple plane here. 3D object plane. There we go. Just going to rotate this 90 degrees. I'm actually going to add here a very simple material. If I can find it again, there we go. So I've got a material here. It's nothing more than a simple material with white color, but a lot of in the emission, right? So I'm set the emission to 4. So this is going to be my light, strangely enough. So I'm gonna make it fit a little bit better here so we can actually see what we're doing. There we are. It's a little bit of like eyeballing this, but we'll get there. There we go. So it's now covering the actual window. Make it a little bit bigger here. So I just wanted to cover the entire window, right? So there you go. I'm going to copy paste this to the other window. There we go. And of course one more. Beautiful. So we now have our planes going to light our scene. So I'm going to hit bake now and I'll show you what happens. I'm going to hit bake here. Progressive light. I'm actually going to turn static first to make sure that I actually do bake them. Generate lighting. There we go. Shouldn't take too long. It's finished, right? You can say, hey, like, hey, there is no highlights, right? There are no highlights. Correct. Because I need to bake my probe here. I'm going to bake my probe here and you'll see what happens. Immediately we're getting highlights. You can see here highlights everywhere. So we have now lit our scene, right? But we now actually have highlights in our texture. Of course, it's not perfect yet because we need to tweak it. But it actually gives you a lot of flexibility because right now the highlights are very strong. I don't really like that. I'm going to do here, I'm going to lower down my intensity of my emission into something like 2. I'm going to bake my probe again and you'll see what happens. See, now I've got a little bit more, less intense. So what's happening here is that when you bake lights like the default Unity lights, they don't have like this visual representation in our light bake. They're not there, they become invisible. So when you bake the probes here, there's nothing to actually to like view that light, right? Because that light becomes invisible, so there's nothing to actually highlight the actual material. So what we did here is we just faked lighting. Well, we actually did lighting, but we now also faked our actual reflection here by actually having it visible in our probe, right? That's the difference between normal lights and a plane. So a normal light becomes invisible when you actually bake it, while actual mesh keeps to be, well, it's visible, and that's why we get these really nice highlights, because this looks way more interesting, right, than the one that I had before. Way more interesting. The problem though is that now this part here also has highlights when there should not be. So how can you fix that? That makes it a little bit more annoying, right, because you have to do a little bit extra step here. I'm going to grab my light probe here. I'm going to actually make it a little bit shorter. I'm going to drag it a little bit to the right here, left, sorry. A little bit more. I'm not going to bake it again. And then we're going to add an extra lighting probe, or sorry, reflection probe. I apologize. I'm going to duplicate this one because I'm a little bit lazy. There we go. I'm going to drag it here. Make sure it's still visible. There we go. And I'm just going to make it a little bit shorter. I don't care if they're overlapping. It's actually better. There we go. So now what I want to do, I want to turn off my lights here. I'm going to grab them, turn them off. Then I'm going to bake that light, only that light. You see, and it actually becomes now a little bit more darker. We still have highlights here, a little bit, because you can see we still have our actual environment in there as well. So if I turn that off, so I'm going to turn off my light here. I'm going to bake this one again. We have no highlights. Well, you have a little bit, but that's the way it is. That's okay. So now you can see, right, we actually have a really nice looking scene with highlights. Of course, there's a hard division here. You can see it. So that just means that we need to make it a little bit more, you know, like mix or like blend distance here. Mine is like not existent. We do the other one here as well. So it's a couple of extra steps here that you need to do in order to actually do this. But the results speak for themselves, right? It's such a difference. We go from a very flat scene to a very interesting scene by just adding planes here and a probe or multiple probes. Big difference here, and it can actually help you a lot when lighting a certain scene. So I've got an example here. Let me show you that one. This example of the level that I'm working on, and it uses the same principle. You can see, right, I've got all these weird light bulbs, like spheres going on. Those are my actual light sources, right? So I don't have actual like lights in there. I have actual light sources in here, like actual physical representation of the light source, and they light the scene, and therefore I get them to show up again in my probes, and therefore I actually get highlights in my textures. It's a very simple technique once you actually know about it. That actually make quite a lot of difference, because you now actually have way more interesting textures. You actually get highlights here right now. That makes a difference, right? And using mixed lights in the scene this size with all these windows here, that would kill my FPS dramatically, and that's why I don't actually use them. That's why I wanted to show you how to do this by just using planes and spheres as a light source. So I hope this was helpful for you, and hopefully again I will see you in the future with a new video. So take care, stay healthy, and stay mentally sane while surviving the pandemic.